Okay, Bryson, the first one is for you. And it relates to your time or your profession as a zoologist. How do you reconcile, or did you reconcile, evolution with the creation account in the Bible?
Well, yes and no, in the sense there's clearly elements of evolution and the way science operates that is incompatible with what the Bible tells us about God as our creator. So there are clearly points of incompatibility, but I thought that you negotiate science and evolution, and like everything else that you negotiate life with, you look at the Bible and you understand what it is that the Bible is wanting us to know, and then you accept it as God's word. So at that level, there were some points of tension, but it wasn't really an issue, I'd have to say.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. Beautiful. Next question's for you, Steve, which relates to assurance. Can a born-again believer lose salvation? And then how are we to talk to mates who've once loved and lived for Jesus but turned away, now chasing the desires of the world? Were they ever saved in the first place?
So I noticed that's 3 questions, so I get 3 times as much time, right? It's a huge question. So this is one of the ones that really we'd want Bryson to give us a half-hour talk on. We're not going to do that. I think for me, the thing that most helps me as I wrestle with these things is, in the end, we're called to trust God with the future, and that includes with my future, with other people's future. In the end, after all the questioning and wrestling with things which we need to wrestle with, we come back to trusting God. He will do the right thing and He's good. So in terms of the specifics, look, I think the theologically correct answer for can a real Christian fall away? Big debates about this. I think the theologically correct answer is probably yes, they can, but they won't. So there are warnings in the Bible. Pay attention to the warnings, because those warnings are real. Don't take your eyes off Jesus. Don't turn away from Jesus, or you will die. They're real warnings, but they're warnings that God will use to help you persevere and to stick it out until the end. And so that's where you can trust God with your future. So what do you do with mates who once were living for Jesus, so it seemed, and have turned away? I was chatting to someone about this yesterday, remembering C.S. Lewis has got a couple of bits in his Narnia books, Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe, which I think are really helpful. He's got this line where a couple of times one of the kids will ask Aslan, who's like the Jesus figure, but what happened with this other character? Why did that happen to them? And Aslan goes, no one is told any story except their own. I think that's actually very helpful. With my friend, I don't know the answer. Is it that they were never really a Christian? Is it that they were a Christian and Jesus hasn't let go of them yet, and we just got to wait until the end and see what happens? I don't know, but that's not mine to know. And so at the end, I trust God with that person's future, trusting that God is very, very good. His mercy and love are much, much bigger than mine. His wisdom is much bigger than mine. I trust God with His future. As you wrestle with your own assurance, but is there fruit in my life? There's a place for that wrestling. At the end, put your eyes back on Jesus. Jesus died for me. I'm going to trust Him with my future.
Great. Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. Next question's for you, Grant. We've got a question about wisdom, which we've been talking a lot about today. Is there a place for worldly wisdom in the Christian man?
In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul talks about worldly wisdom in a sense of being utterly foolish. Now, as far as that kind of worldly wisdom goes, for example, the wisdom that may say that I can get to God by my own way, in my own strength, in my own effort, through my own profit, I want to say there's no place for that wisdom in the Christian man whatsoever. But is there wisdom in the world that we can glean as a Christian? I'd say absolutely. So when I was young, I was learning how to ride a dirt bike, and my parents weren't Christian at the time, but I'd assume that if they were, they wouldn't go to the Bible to learn what principles were in place for me to be able to ride a motorbike well. These are things that we glean from the world. I'm a father. Sometimes I get advice for how to love my daughter from things that were written by people who are outside the church. This is wisdom, and I think it's good and right for us to assess that wisdom. And I think it's okay for us to take it and to use it where we need to use it and where we think it's right to use it. Always having the Bible as the lens through which we analyze all that wisdom to make sure that it is something that's compatible with what God has revealed in His Word. And just remember also for me that God is revealed as the God of truth. And so we want to hold to the principle that all truth is God's truth. And so if it's out there in the world and it's true and it's good and it's wholesome and it's going to help me achieve a God-desired outcome, then I think it's well worth us considering using it.
Yeah, all praise be to the God of truth, isn't it? That has given us that and revealed that. Bryson, we've got a question specifically relating to Proverbs 9, which is going to appear up on the screen next. It's really got to do with the significance of having wisdom portrayed as a woman in Proverbs 9:13, and is that a counterpoint to another woman that's mentioned in verse 1? Why does gender come into play in personifying wisdom?
Okay, so verse 13, folly's depicted as a woman, and I think that's deliberately to contrast with the wisdom being woman in verse 1, and so it's drawing on the whole parallels of, and I think I tried to point that out, that often wisdom and folly will come at us and they'll seem very, very similar. So it's just playing off all those parallels that can be on the surface between the two. I guess the deeper question is why depict it as a person anyway? Why didn't the text simply say, folly, it does this, or wisdom, it does this, as opposed to he or she? And I'm not 100% sure I understand that. Know why, other than a couple of factors. Obviously, it's a literary device that engages us and draws us in. But I wonder whether there is something a bit deeper in its tapping into the fact that wisdom is actually a very relational knowledge. And it's built on a relational truth of fearing the Lord. So I actually wonder whether it's sort of tapping into the relational aspect that real wisdom is, that you need insight and relational skills in negotiating life. So I'm wondering if it's tapping into something a bit deeper at that level.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, we're going to apply that a little bit further, and we'll start with Steve. If you guys got something to add to this question, by all means chip in. Questions come in relation to being a husband and father, wanting to pay down the mortgage, minimise the debt, and be financially responsible, but at the same time wanting to be generous with the money given. So any advice, Steve?
I feel like an ex-missionary is not the person to ask about paying a mortgage. But anyway, yeah, start with me. Yeah. Okay. Look, a couple of things to say. The first, I really feel like this one I'm looking at going, I haven't got a lot, but I think there's a reason I haven't got a lot, and that is we want the Bible to give us a number, right? We want the Bible to, no, I want to know how much I should give, and Jesus never does it, okay? So I would say there is, any advice on getting the balance right, there is balance in the Bible, and especially in Proverbs. So the Proverbs will say, well, it's foolish not to think about the future and not to be like the ant that stores up. But then if you're living for money and to get wealth, you're headed down the path to ruin. So there is balance. However, I think balance can also be a little bit dangerous because in a sense, the final word of Jesus to us in the New Testament is not balance, but generosity. And generosity usually stings. Generosity usually feels like, I don't really know if I can afford this. But that's the way that within the balance of the Bible, Jesus pushes us towards generosity because of what happens to do with where you invest. Am I actually investing in kingdom things or am I investing in things in this earth? Where you put your treasure, Jesus says, that's where your heart will be. That's all I got.
Amen.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The Bible has a lot to say about generosity. It's not a lot to say about even having a mortgage.
Okay. Grant, we're back to you. The Bible says, get wisdom. How do I get wisdom?
Can I borrow your Bible?
Good place to turn.
So the reason I'm flicking through the Bible here is because there's actually, that question gets answered. So, Job says, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding. This is in a chapter where he talks about the fact that men mine for silver and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth, copper is smelted from ore. Man puts an end to the darkness, he searches the farthest recesses for ore in the blackest darkness. Far from where people dwell, he cuts a shaft in places forgotten by the foot of man. Far from man, he dangles and sways. The earth from which food comes is transformed below as by fire. Sapphires come from its rocks, and its dust contains nuggets of gold. No bird of prey knows its hidden path, no falcon's eye has seen it. And then he asks the question, but where can wisdom be found? Where does understanding dwell? Man does not comprehend its worth, it cannot be found in the land of the living. And then he finally ends the chapter by saying, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding. And I want to say, if you want wisdom, and it cannot be found in the land of the living, then it has to be found in God. He is the source of it. You want to hear from God? We have His Word. This is why I think it's good and right for us to attend churches that teach and stand on the Bible, because this is where wisdom is found. And the wise man will fear the Lord. That's probably a mixture, of terror and respect, and to turn away from evil. That's to understand it.
Grant's just picked up one of my favourite chapters in the Old Testament, in the Bible. I love Job chapter 28. And I think underlying what Grant's just read and talked about, and actually thinking about Bryson and Proverbs, is the importance of humility, that in a sense is step one. And so Job 28 is all about how mankind's achievements. There's all this stuff that we can do, and we're brilliant, and we can achieve, and we can build. The one thing we can't do by our own achievement and brilliance is find true wisdom. You can only do that by going, Lord, you're the only one who has wisdom, please help me. So in a sense, step one to all of this and to the fear of the Lord is always humility, like Bryson said, recognising your place, saying, I need you.
Yeah, and also, if I can just finish off that by thanking God that since we are here after your wisdom has personified itself in Jesus, we don't necessarily have to go to a book, in a sense. We go to a person, and we go to Jesus, and we have His words recorded, and we have them written down, and we have His Spirit in us that's driving us toward that search. And so through engaging with Jesus and through praying that His Spirit would powerfully continue to work in our hearts and drive us and reveal those nuggets of truth that He revealed to us, I think that's where wisdom will be found, yeah.
Absolutely. And James actually says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him.
That's a wonderful promise that's there, that we can ask God and speak to Him. Steve, this next question's for you. Probably a common question amongst the guys in this room. Battling with porn at the moment. I know God's way is the best way. Can you help offer some wisdom in this situation?
Sure. I think for many of us, this will be a lifelong struggle and question. And I do want to say, in a sense, that's okay. I mean, it's not okay. Porn's not okay. We know that. But to have the expectation that this may well be a long road, it's not like some of us may experience a sort of miraculous healing from attraction to porn. For others of us, it's going to be a long struggle. So keep struggling. The two things I'd say that might help are, first of all, the best way to feed your porn addiction is not to be honest with someone, with a Christian friend, and not to tell them, I'm struggling with this, I stuffed up yesterday. Can you help me? Can you pray with me? That kind of thing. So the best way to feed it is to keep it secret and to hide it, and not to be open and honest with someone, with a Christian friend who will help you. The second thing I want to say is that I think the most powerful truth for helping us with this issue is justification by faith alone through Jesus' perfect sacrifice. That is, to remember that even in that moment when you fall again and you go to that website or whatever it is, in that moment, you are still a precious, loved child of God. Nothing has actually changed from God's point of view in your relationship. Your sins are already washed away and washed clean, and you are pure and clean in His sight. Obviously not because of anything you've done, but because Jesus, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one, and He's always there, and He always covers our sin. That, of course, does not excuse. So I'm not going to take that and go, oh, great, I can look up porn. It's actually the complete opposite. That is actually the truth which you hang on to, which will help you fight next time. And so the one thing that the devil does not want you to do 2 seconds after you've looked at porn is go to your Father. That's the one thing. And so that sense of shame actually tells you, I can't look God in the face now. How can I do that now? And it pushes you away. You're a loved child of God. And the one thing Satan doesn't want you to do is to go to your Father who loves you and you're His child. And the thing that will help you to do that is to remember, Jesus has washed away my sin. I'm justified by what Jesus did.
Yeah, so consequence for me is helpful as well when it comes to pornography, because sometimes we can feel as if we can engage with pornography because I'm not hurting anyone but myself. In a sense, it's just me and whoever is on the computer screen, and whether I do this or not, that person's not getting affected, and I'm not really, in a sense, hurting anyone, particularly if you're single. If you're married, that excuse kind of goes out the window because you're giving your heart to someone else. But I found it helpful to remember that every year there are 800,000 people who are sold across international borders in an industry that is the third largest illegal industry in the world. That's behind drugs and illegal arms dealing. It is, out of those 800,000, 640,000 of them are women and children, and the vast majority of them are sold because of the sex trade industry. Now, you might think that the largest contributing factor to that industry being present are people walking into brothels and paying money for sex. It's not. It's people sitting behind computers clicking on images and videos on the internet. And so when you're at home and you're sitting behind your computer and you don't think you're hurting anyone, just remember that what I'm doing is contributing to that industry where there are 640,000 women and children who are going to be sold into the sex industry because of people like the decisions that you're making. So you are hurting others. There is a consequence to this, and just remember that. If you want to believe the lie that you're not hurting anyone, you are. You're contributing to something that is enormous and very, very, very bad.
That's really helpful, because the whole porn industry is built on the lie which male brains believe in about 0.2 milliseconds that the women enjoy it. That's the lie.
Gentlemen, thank you for... we'll have to end it there, but if there's anything that we can take away from today, it's that sin thrives in darkness. And the beauty of us gathering together today is that it doesn't have to thrive in the darkness any longer.